Welcome back everyone to episode 5, part 8. We are continuing with the joys of the subselect, inline view or derived table, whichever term you wish to use, and we're now moving into the 4th video. We've covered the subselect in quite a bit of detail now. In the last one we were looking at putting the subselect in place of one of the columns in our select statement. So we looked at that when it was just simply pulling one single value. This time round we're going to have a look at joining within that subselect to the outer part of the query in order to bring different values in. First of all though, let's have a quick run through of the scenario that I left you with at the end of the previous video, just to make sure that you're happy with the question and the answer posed. Let's see what you got versus what I managed to code myself. Right, we're already in Wide World of Borders database, so we can crack straight on with the answer. So the question was, we needed to provide the following columns then: supplier name, PO number, item description, order quantity, and then somehow we needed to get the average order quantity for the entire year, and that of course we're going to bring in via a subselect in the column itself. It's only a single value, so pretty easy to get hold of. And of course we had a filter in there for all orders in 2016. So pretty straightforward. Here's what I wrote here. So first of all, we've got our suppliers in order to get our supplier name. So that went in straight away. And then our purchase orders gave us our PO number, which is our purchase order ID. If we look at that, and I've filtered it on the inner join itself. You may have filtered it on the where clause, giving our order date of 2016. Either way works perfectly well, purely up to you how you wanted to do that one. As long as you got that filter in there, then it's all good. So that's covering the 2016 orders. Item description then, that we had to join in our purchase order lines to get that, as well as the order quantity, which is of course our ordered items. So there's the description coming from our purchase order lines, which we've all pseudonymized nicely there. And that was the more straightforward aspect, pulling different figures, different values, different data from several tables. Next, we need to bring in the average order quantity for the entire year. Now we know that the order quantity comes from our purchase order lines. So all I've done here was select, put in the function for the average, ordered outers from the purchase order lines table. Now we need to make sure that we do filter those values as well. If we grab that column, have a look at it very quickly, you'll see the last edited when is in 2013 for the top 100 rows. Obviously as we go through the values, we'll start to hit 2016 values. So we needed to make sure we had another filter there, which is on the year function equals 2016, and that gives us our average order quantity. Pretty easy enough, pretty straightforward. Now you may potentially have done it this way as well, where you've simply brought pretty much this join here into your subselect within your column there. So if we have a look at that, run off that code, execute, we get 249, which is just the one value, so we know we can put it quite easily in that column without error. Now moving on to this, we've done the same thing, average orders, and we have taken it from the purchase orders and we have put in our where clause to filter it by 2016. So that's where we've put our where clause in there. Of course, we had to join it to the order lines to get the average order outers. Grab that, make sure I pseudonymize everything. And then open and close brackets around our subselects. Let's run that one off quickly, and you can see I only get one value at the end. So once again, we can include that in our select columns there. So let's give that a go. And as you can see, here's the date, the purchase order ID, quite a few purchase order IDs for the same customer, but the description of the item ordered is different. So there's our ordered items, and there's average quantity 2449, average quantity 2449 as well. So we know that we can use both these queries here, both these subselects, and produce exactly the same result. So there you have it, all the way down for all the orders. Quite a few in there. So how did you all do? Pretty straightforward stuff really, with one subselect in the column. Two ways to do the same thing, up to you how you wanted to tackle it. Hopefully you got the same data as me in the end. Righty then, let's move on to the lesson itself. What we're going to do here is we are going to look at inline views within the select statements, within the columns itself, but we're going to be throwing in a cheeky join there. Now, the key thing to remember is that when we do our subselect, we have to actually pseudonymize it there. So we call our order lines as L, and then we say where L order ID equals O order ID. So I can hear you thinking, hold on a minute, there's no inner join in your subselect on table O, and of course there's no table O in there at all. So what's going on? Key thing to remember is when you use this methodology where you replace the join with a where clause, what you're basically saying is select the sum quantity from order lines where the order ID on this little query here equals the order ID on O, and O is our sales orders table, and that's actually outside of our subselect. So we've closed our brackets there, but we can still reference the outside query from within our subselect. So it gets quite interesting, a little bit of complexity in there. Let's have a look. Sum quantity of order lines when we just select it as is. So if we're just doing the normal subselect to select one value alone, we get our one value. But the thing is, we want to see the quantity for every single order that comes in. So we then need to put in our where clause and then do some sort of join, some sort of link. And it's not your standard inner join or left join, etc. We're simply saying where, so we're putting a where clause where one order ID from the order lines equals the other order ID from our orders table from outside our subselect. We're then going to do the same thing, exactly the same thing here, where you've got unit price and quantity, etc. Now, another thing you've probably noticed is that we've got an L, pseudonymized L, within our subselect, but we've also got an L on the outside. So you'd think that SQL Server would get confused, thinking, well, which L are we going to join it on, which L are we referring to? But it's pretty intelligent enough to know that this L is consumed, this pseudonym is consumed within the subquery, because we're actually naming a table as L within there, but because there's no other table which we're pseudonymizing at O, then this must be from outside of our subselect. Starting to make sense? Can be a little bit tricky to get your head around those, but once the penny sinks in, once the penny drops and it sinks in, it's pretty straightforward. So the only difference between pulling one value is now we're basically doing some sort of join on the order IDs with the inner table and one of the outer tables outside the subselect. So let's have a look at those values. As you can see, the query itself is very, very similar to the ones that we've been working with so far. Let's run that off and we'll see exactly what's going on. So there you have it. Here's our first order ID. Let's bring those up quickly. As you can see, there's two order IDs because there's two order lines, different quantities, different line prices. However, what we wanted was the total order quantity per order ID. That's why we joined it on the order ID here and the order ID there as well. So you can see for order ID ending in 42, we had a total order quantity of 84, which is that plus that to give us 84, and then the total order price is that plus that. So we're not returning one value, we're simply returning whatever links in to the order ID. So we're kind of grouping by the order ID here in a way. Very simple. Put in your where clause and do your join like that. So for every order ID, you can see for ending in 43, 135 is 125 plus 8 plus 2, and the same with the order price. So that is how to join your subselects within the select statements to a table on the outside. Pretty nifty stuff. And of course we had 73,000 rows, exactly the same as the previous queries we ran on the previous video. Now we can have a look at that versus the subselect within the joins as well. Again, we're going back to pretty familiar ground here, where all we're doing is we're selecting the sum of the quantity, unit price times the quantity, total order price, total order quantity, and we're simply grouping on the order ID. So that's our single subselect which we're inner joining on. We've got our filter there, and we don't need to filter this data here within our subselect with the where clause, because we end up joining on the order IDs, and we know the order IDs are unique. So this will be filtered, our order state will be filtered by the where clause here. It'll then join on each order ID to whatever's in our subselect. Makes sense so far? So that returns 73,000 rows as well. And as you can see, the data is exactly the same. So all we're doing in our subselect is returning these values here based on a specific order ID, grouped by that order ID, and then we're chucking it against every single line with our two columns there. So very similar methodologies to achieve the same result. One is within the subselect, one is of course the subselect in the column itself, not forgetting to join in the where clause there. Another skill that you've learned in order to join within the joins there. Let's have a look at another example to see if we can make this a little bit more clear. The scenario is that the purchasing manager is after some data yet again. She needs to see the amount of purchase orders, POs that is, that have been purchased for each supplier versus the average orders that have been purchased for all suppliers, just for orders in 2016. Right then, so what we're going to do is follow the steps below. We'll simply build a query to return the total order quantity by supplier. So let's do that very quickly. And we're going to use this to build up our sub-selects within the columns themselves. Okay, so total order quantity, and we need to bring in, what do we need to bring in? This is all about purchase orders. Let's have a look at the tables here. We've got our purchased orders there. So we'll bring in our purchase orders as the header, and more than likely we'll need to join on the purchase order lines. So let's bring those ones in. And again guys, if you want to give this a go before I continue further, then by all means crack on and give it a try. Order ID. So build up a query to return total order quantity by supplier. So we probably need to bring in our supplier ID. Have we got a supplier ID? Which is in the purchase orders table here, because at some point we'll probably be joining that potentially. We'll see how it goes. There's our supplier ID, and we need to make sure we filter it by orders in 2016. So let's put a filter there. So there you have it. We've simply built that up, and we need to of course supply the total order quantity, which is, as we all know, sum of ordered outers in this case. Alrighty then, let's put our sum in there as total ordered outers. Fantastic stuff. Let's have a look at our code there. Oh, invalid in the select list, not contained in the aggregate function. So what have we left out? We've left out our group by. Now we won't need our group by when we actually bring this into a sub-select, but we'll just make sure that our code works. So we've only got 3 suppliers there who have delivered items to us, and these are the total ordered from them. So we know that our first one, step 1, it's all good. Step 2 then, turn a query to return the average order quantity by all suppliers. So in this one we need to have the same thing, but there is no group by, it's by all suppliers, so the entire lot. So we'll simply grab that query, bring in the sum there, and we don't need to group by because we're simply bringing in all the ordered items for 2016. This is after the average, so let's put that one in there, and we'll change that to average ordered outers. So let's run that off, and you can see we get one single figure of 2449, which, if you remember, we've seen in a previous query. Alright then, so that's step 1. we've brought in the total order quantity by supplier, and step 2, we return the average across the board. Okay, then we need to build up our final query and return these columns here. So let's give it a go. And we need our suppliers. That's where our supplier name is. We're going to call that S. Supplier name. So we've got all our supplier names there. We're going to be inner joining to one of these, so we will make sure we pull the right information for 2016. So we've got in our build our subselects, so let's start doing that, and we're putting them in the columns themselves. So here's our coding here. Let's bring in the entire lot for now. And we are going to close it off there. Move those in line. So first things first, we don't need our supplier ID at the moment because we just need the sum as total ordered outers, and again we don't need that within because we're actually going to name our column as total ordered outers. So we're pulling a value here that we don't need the name because we're giving it the column and name there. Everything's great except in our where clause. Instead of the group by, we are simply saying and supplier ID equals, on the outside we have S supplier ID. So that's our filter there. We've got in our where clause, we're making sure that supplier ID equals supplier ID on the outside table that we're joining to. So all of this is on the inside, and then in our where clause, supplier ID pseudonymized with S is on the outside. So just a few tweaks from our original code up here, and we've managed to put it in to our subselect within our column itself. As you can see, a comma, and then open and close bracket, and then we've got to give the column a name, which we've done here, total ordered outers. Right, next we have to bring in the average order quantity. Now this one should be pretty easy, as it's simply one single value that we're not even going to be joining on. We've joined supplier ID on this subselect here. The next one, as mentioned, very straightforward. All we need to do is give it a name as average orders. Let's line those up for you, and there you go. Pretty much straightforward. That's an easy one because it's just one value, no joins. This one a little bit trickier because in our where clause we have to say supplier ID on the inside equals the supplier ID on the outside table. Okay, pretty straightforward. Let's give that a go. Let's see if it works. There you go. You've got the supplier name, total ordered outers, and the average ordered outers there. Now you see there's only 13 suppliers that we have in our entire database, and some of them have null values there. And now that is because, if you remember, when we ran off our first select here, we only had 3 supplier IDs, and you can see those values there. So if we run this off, as you can see, there's our 3 values in there. There were no values there. However, as we are pulling every single supplier from purchasing suppliers, we get these nulls creeping in, and of course because it puts the average ordered outers against every supplier, we'll get those 214s there. If we wanted to get rid of those nulls and just have those 3 columns there, we can say, we can put in a filter there. We can say where this is not null. Quite a lot going on in that little where clause there, but this is just a quick and easy trick for you. As you can see, it got rid of all the nulls. So that is a is not null. So we wanted the ones that actually had figures. And there you have it. So quite a lot going on. As you can see, we built up our sub-selects first, got the logic with those correct. Then we built up our main query and brought the code in, remembering to get rid of any single columns in here because we ended up joining on that column on the inside and the out. This one is just one figure across the board, so we just brought it in as our simple and usual sub-select in the column there. A little trick for you at the end to get rid of the nulls. If you really wanted to, you didn't need to, but that's just something to show you you can quite easily remove those nulls. So that is pretty much it for the sub-select within the columns, and including a cheeky join from the inner table O to one of the outer tables S. Where is he? There we go, there's our outer table there. Fancy giving that a try on your own? If so, I've got another little scenario for you to check out. So, after supplying the PO data above to the purchasing manager, there still appears to be some discrepancies between what she is seeing from the system and what is being extracted from the back-end database. Therefore, she has asked you for some transactional data from all suppliers based on the transactions for 2015. So you need to supply the following data to her. First of all, she's after the supplier name and the supplier category. She's after the payment method used in the transaction. Then the supplier's invoice number, bring that one in. Then the pre-tax amount per invoice, and then after a couple of total columns, total pre-tax amount per supplier, and then the total pre-tax amount for the whole year. So potentially two sub-selects in the columns for you there. So give that a go, remembering your filter there, 2015. Look for the supplier transactions table, anything to do with transactions and suppliers. You'll be working mainly with that table. However, you could be pulling in a few more to get these different columns here. So give that a try, everyone. If you don't do too well or you struggle, don't worry, the answer will be in the next video. So join me then in the 5th and final video of this part 8, and until then, everyone, I hope you all have a fantastic day.